Greetings and welcome to Patent Insider Secrets, Patent Insider Tidbits. Today we're going to be sharing story of Twitter. Everybody's seeing in the news right now that Elon Musk has made his bid to buy Twitter for $44 billion. That's a huge number. But let's take a step back and look at what's happening and look at what this means for a startup. As you know, Patent Insider, we work with SaaS founders. We help SaaS founders save their startups from IP disaster. But this story, every now and then something comes up in the news and the media, and it gives us a moment to kind of look at things and see, put things in perspective. So if we look at Twitter's startup journey, Twitter started July 16th, 2006. It was actually a software application, a free software application that was a project for a status sharing app from a parent company, Odeo. So that company was founded in 2004. It no longer exists. The project that they started, Twitter, is about to be acquired for $44 billion. So a big thing here we want to highlight in this little tidbit is it's important to remember the journey. A lot of times we remember the result, we remember the outcome, we don't remember the path that got us there. We don't remember the peaks, the valleys. We look at this, we see this headline, and sometimes we get FOMO, fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. Is my startup going to hit it big? When am I going to hit my exit? When am I going to hit these milestones? So part of this is just to kind of put things in context. What's the story? What's the story that we have when we're looking at Twitter? It doesn't start and end with $44 billion. So we actually have a link to our this in our blog. We'll go over that as well. But basically, if we look at Twitter, Twitter started in 2007. And this just shows a little bit of the story. We're going to go through this in detail, but you can see it started small. It started small. It took a long time to catch on. When it did catch on after a few years, it went international. It got a huge user base. And again, this is a free application. So it's a free application. They introduced advertising. They introduced other means of providing or getting income. But for the most part, this was money being pumped into the company to build the user base. And then they had to figure out how to monetize it. Because right to this day, Twitter is still free. And it's began to acquire companies. At one point, it had an $8 billion valuation. At the time, they said that was baseless. So these are all some of the things that happened. They had an IPO that had a huge valuation of $31 billion. The very next week, Forbes put out an article that said why Twitter's IPO was really a failure. Some people got fired behind this. Some people lost their jobs because it didn't perform like they thought it was supposed to perform. Even though it went from $26 to $44.90, they had projected it to have a higher IPO. So some people didn't ride that out. So this is just to remind you that the story, again, is not the beginning and end is not $44 billion. Twitter gained some huge political clout. The Obama administration, President Obama, was the one who really engaged in using Twitter and social media. One of the first presidents to do so. But the next president used it frequently and quite aggressively and quite controversially, to the point that in January 2001, Twitter suspended a sitting president from Twitter. But basically, at that point, Twitter had become, even though it's a free application, it had become synonymous with free speech in the social media era. So this social media app that started as a project in 2006 became something that was, newsworthy, that press releases were being tweeted. And even so, it's a difference a week makes, right? April 15th, the Twitter board of directors was adopting a poison pill after Musk bid to buy the company. The next news report 10 days later is Musk is to acquire Twitter for 44 billion. Jack Dorsey, co-founder of Twitter, one of the co-founders, in line to receive up to $1 billion. So this is just, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of activity there. A lot of things that happen, but let's take even a deeper dive into what the story is, okay? Let's look at the story. So if we look at the story, again, we're going to go to our blog that goes into a little bit more detail. And then we're going to share with you an opportunity to engage with us live. So in our blog post, we basically, we go through it in detail, a lot of the steps along the way. Twitter's journey. What we want to say again, as a SaaS founder, it's easy to get sucked into the headline. $44 billion. Billionaire Elon Musk is going to acquire Twitter for $44 billion. This has been in the news for the last couple of weeks, at least the last 10 days, heavy, but almost all of April, some, speculation of Elon Musk and Twitter has been buzzing. And it's a great headline. It's a salacious headline. It's a headline that gets you excited. It's a headline that gets you intrigued. But even for the founders that have exited, even for the founders that have started something and gotten to a point, that this is momentous when you get to an exit, when you get to an acquisition, when you're able to buy yourself out, get back, recoup all the investment. But that's not where the story begins. It's not the journey. And so we want to talk about the journey. Again, we said Twitter was founded in 2006, originally developed as a status sharing app. The parent company, ODO, founded in 2004, now defunct. Initially, Twitter looked like this. It was just green words. There's no, vowels. There was no Twitter without the I or the E. And it didn't take off immediately. They had a lot of different, attempts to get people to use it. And they would put all this money in attempts to only get about 100 new signups. And signups did not mean they actually used the platform. They signed up, but it didn't mean they were engaging the platform. So they did not have a huge user base. And again, it started in July 16, 2006. And it wasn't until South by Southwest in 2007. You see this here. This is in March of 2007 that they were using Twitter. There was a Twitter, Jack Dorsey led a panel, or Twitter and social cyborgs explaining Twitter. From based on my research, I'm not sure whether or not there was actually live tweeting or not at this event. Some things say there was live tweeting or live demonstrations. Others say, just more of a presentation. Not really sure. Maybe somebody can find some video and see if that exists. But basically, once they did this South by Southwest, they really started to get traction, get more tech users to use the platform. So now they had shown some user viability. The company, ODO, allowed them to spin off into a private company. They began to, Jack Dorsey at the helm. A lot of this you can find in this book here. We have a link to it on Amazon if you want to purchase it. But it's a book that goes through the story of Twitter, especially the early years. Sometimes if you're a founder, you like to read stories and see how these companies make decisions. I read a lot of books like that, trying to understand the landscape, a lot of the decisions. And while I'm looking for the intersection of intellectual property and how those decisions were made, these make good business books just to understand the story. Some things are, better researched than others. Some things are more fictional, but this is from all research. This is a very good narration of Twitter's early story, hatching Twitter. So they were basically completed a $5 million funding round 2007. So that's great. That's 1 year in. They proved traction. Probably this is based on a lot of tractions from the South by Southwest, showing that there are users. This is something. So they did that $5 million raise with a $20 million valuation. So that's a 25%. So they're carving up equity at this point. So lots of innovation, hashtags. August 2007, we started having hashtags. This is the inventor of the hashtag. And we say hashtag, when you write code, hashtagging is a way of commenting. So it's not an invention, so to speak. but the use of them, as you use to tag things in code and mark things, they wanted to use that in Twitter as well. And it actually has caught on to now. One of the most popular features is used in almost every social media platform outside of Twitter as well. So then in June 2008, they secured a second funding round, and in February 2009, a third funding round. Again, probably parsing out equity of the company. But what happened, Twitter started getting use worldwide beyond their US base for the most part. And you had this, what's described as a Twitter revolution. You had protests happening in the Middle East. You had in Iran, in Egypt, I would say, I believe Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, all these different places, Yemen. These color revolutions, or the jasmine, the pink, they called the Arab Spring of all these different revolutions, and they called it the Twitter revolution. How the Arab Spring was helped by social media. So now you see, social media activism using communication in the social media platform as Twitter to be able to communicate in real time. We also saw some Black Lives Matter protests and the different social justice protests in the wake of in Ferguson, all the way up to George Floyd. We see Twitter being used to mobilize people in real time. So there is a value that we're seeing in the social capital in the society. In 2011, Twitter completed a Series G funding round. $800 million, giving the company $8 billion valuation. This article says $400 million, but they used this $800 million to buy out their previous investors with $400 million. So yes, they end up with $400 million, but it's at an $8 billion valuation. Also in 2012, they hit a milestone of having 140 million users. So that's a long way from the 100 users to 140 million users. Daily usage is 340 million tweets per day. So we're seeing engagement. And so this is something they used to sell, I'm sure, advertisements to get businesses involved, to have subscription levels, to use Twitter, to have greater monetization of the platform. In, of course, using the data analytics that they from having that many active users to also sell that data to monetize the platform. So then Twitter began to acquire other technologies and other social media companies that could augment and increase their platform. So they acquired Vine. They launched Vine as a separate app, and once the videos and that aspect of Vine that's been incorporated now in Twitter to be able to use video, they've had live video features that they've debuted. They have Twitter Spaces. So there's a lot of innovation, but a lot of that comes from acquisition of other companies and finding ways to repurpose the technology. So all of these, think about the journey. As I'm talking through this, think about the journey along the way. This is not a one and done situation. It's not we wake up one day, start a company, and then tomorrow we're 44 billion. This is a lot. So Twitter had a huge IPO. Like we talked about, IPO started at $26 and ended at $44.90. They projected to go higher than that. So again, Forbes put an article out that said why Twitter's IPO was really a failure. And there's analysis about this for many years about the failure of Twitter and how Twitter was not really a good stock to buy. And there really was no value associated with it. It wasn't really making money. It was losing money. All these types of analysis of Twitter as a failure. And then Twitter also became, like we said, synonymous with free speech. We had a president and President Obama that really used social media as a part of his campaign, really strategically used Twitter and social media to galvanize his political base. So then began to see Twitter being used as a political tool. On the other side, we saw the conservative, if you want to call it conservative party or just the other political ideologies using the platform in a different way with the, I guess, coming to a head with President Trump and his use of Twitter in a more as his news, as his press release, as his organ of choice to directly communicate with the public, to the point that there was a contentious relationship between Twitter. They were removed from the president's tweets, all kinds of things like that. So eventually they suspended President Trump from Twitter. that a lot of people thought that was a great thing. Some people on the conservative side thought it was horrible. How could you remove a president? So saying Twitter has had to deal with these things as a company. And I don't know that Twitter was ever trying to get into politics. Twitter was definitely trying to, grow the company, build traction, get revenue, substantiate their business. But this is all the things that they're dealing with along the journey. And then the nice headline is, okay, April 25th, 2022, Twitter is selling for $44 billion. One of the co-founders of Twitter is set to receive close to $1 billion payout after the sale of Twitter closes. So that's a considerable ROI on a 16-year investment in a tech startup, something that started as a project of a company that no longer exists. So as a SaaS founder, again, we get sucked into the headlines, but what we want you to do in this episode of Pat Insider Tidbits is just look at how this is a journey. It doesn't start at one particular place and end somewhere with nothing in between. There are highs and lows. Jack Dorsey stepped down as CEO, then came back again as CEO. There have been other CEOs of Twitter. Some founders have gotten out, got their buyouts, taking their stock options. There's different ways that this goes. Everybody involved is not necessarily benefiting in the same way from this buyout. But this was Twitter's journey. And if this acquisition goes through like they're saying, then it shows you how much is possible in a short 16 years. In a short 16 years, you could have a kid, the kid's not even in college yet, and you could be $1 billion richer. So these are just showing that there's a journey, there's a story, and your story is your story. So if you're committed, you don't let anything hold you back. If you're willing to do anything to reach your goals, to be willing to sacrifice and go all in and find ways to make it happen, then we want to ask you, what's your journey? What's your journey? Now, we do have an opportunity on our, we shared this on LinkedIn and we also shared this on Twitter, and we have an opportunity for you to participate with us. Now, what we have on our LinkedIn, we have a poll. So this is the post version of this article. We have a poll here you can participate in. You can talk about where you are in your startup journey, bootstrapping, angel, pre-seed, seed, enterprise level, Series A and beyond. Or if you just want to, and leave in the comments, what is it, seeing Twitter's story, what does that mean to you? Let us know. We want to hear about it. And again, this is another time we'll talk about the IP along the way. We talk about, any patents or any intellectual property associated with Twitter. But right now, it's just really, this is encouragement to let you know the story is important. The story is part of it. There's a link also. You can go to our blog and it goes to the timeline on Wikipedia of Twitter. Just kind of see what they've gone through. We also have this link in our on our Twitter profile. So we have the same thread in our Twitter profile. You can go through the thread. At the end of the thread is a poll. So if you want to participate on Twitter, you can participate on Twitter. This is talking about Twitter, or you can participate on LinkedIn. So that's it. This is our Pat Insider Tidbit today. I hope this was valuable. Again, the takeaway, the headline is not the story. It doesn't tell you the journey. Look at the journey and then think about what your journey is going to be. What's your story? Everything that you do right now is part of that story. It can be a set back for a setup to move forward. Everything does not move on an upward trajectory along the path every time. You have ups and downs. You have things that challenges. You may not get that investment that you're looking for right now. You may have to get a job and do this on the side as you continue to move and push forward. You may have to make adjustments along the way. But as long as you don't quit, it's not a failure. It's part of the journey. So I want you to remember that this is part of the journey. Here at Pat Insider Startup, again, we're here committed to saving you from an IP disaster along that journey. But focus on the journey. Focus on your path. There's an opportunity for you to do better than Twitter. you have a $50 billion buyout. So we look at this, a lot of the largest companies were startups, tech startups recently. These companies, Netflix, Amazon, Microsoft, all of these are tech companies. These are some of the largest value companies in the world today, were started as technical solutions for problems that exist, and they've continued to innovate, continue to work that journey. So let this be fuel for you. Let this be encouragement. Let this be, an example of what can go right. Even when, that Forbes article and many others have panned Twitter as a failure from their IPO, we see here that that's not true. So with that being said, thank you for joining us for our quick Patent Insider tidbits. We share these each week to keep you aware of what's going on and help inform you on the intersection of intellectual property and technology. That being said, this is Patent Insider Tariq Najil signing off. Patent Insider Startup. Until next time.